So here's what I expect that they will tell you. The process was so unfair. It was the most unfair in the history of the world. Because in the House, they took depositions. How dare they take depositions? How dare they listen to Trey Gowdy? How dare they follow the Republican procedures that preceded their investigation? How dare they? And they were so secret in the bunker in the basement, as if whether it's on the ground floor or the basement or the first floor makes any difference. Those super secret depositions in which only 100 members of Congress, equivalent to the entire Senate, could participate. That's how secret they were. That's how exclusive they were. Every Democrat, every Republican on 3 committees could participate. Of course, that wasn't enough, so you had even more storm the Schiff, right? So you have 100 people can participate, but you heard earlier, but the Republicans weren't allowed to participate. Okay, that's just false. You know how we did it in those super secret depositions? And you can look this up yourself because we released the transcripts. We got an hour, they got an hour. We got 45 minutes, they got 45 minutes. And we did that back and forth until everyone was done asking their questions. Now you'll hear, oh, Chairman Schiff was so unfair, he wouldn't allow us to ask our questions. Well, there were certain questions I didn't allow. Questions like, who's the whistleblower? Because we want to punish that whistleblower. Because yes, some of us in this House and in this House believe we ought to protect whistleblowers. So yes, I did not allow the outing of the whistleblower. So when they say the chairman wouldn't allow certain questions, that's what they mean. That means that we protect people who have the courage to come forward and blow the whistle. That we don't think, though the president might, that they're traitors and spies. To believe that someone who blows the whistle on misconduct of the serious nature that you now know took place is a traitor or spy, there is only one way you can come to that conclusion. And that is if you believe you are the state and that anything that contradicts you is treason. That is the only way that you can conceive of someone who exposes wrongdoing is a traitor or a spy. But that is exactly how this president views those who expose his wrongdoing, because he is the state. Like any good monarch, he is the state. And you'll hear the president wasn't allowed to participate in the Judiciary Committee. Well, that's false too, as you've heard. The president had the same rights in our proceedings as President Nixon and President Clinton. But nonetheless, you'll hear it was so unfair. And one other thing that was really unfair is all the subpoenas were invalid because the House didn't pass a resolution announcing its impeachment inquiry. Never mind that we actually did. The problem was they said, well, we hadn't, and then we did. And then the problem was, well, you did. Now, of course, as you know, the Constitution says the House will have the sole power of impeachment. If we want to do it by House resolution, we can do it by House resolution. If we want to do it by committee, we can do it by committee. It is not the president's place to tell us how to conduct an impeachment proceeding any more than it is the president's place to tell you how you should try it. So when you see that 8-page diatribe from the White House counsel saying we should have been able to have a resolution in the House, or we should have been able to have this, what you should hear, what they really mean is Donald Trump had the right to control his own impeachment proceeding. And it's an outrage that Donald Trump didn't get to write the rules of his own impeachment proceeding in the House. You give a president that right, there is no impeachment power. But when you hear them say that, when you hear them complain about depositions that were the same as the Republicans, or the right to participate that was the same in Clinton and Nixon, and by the way, they weren't allowed to call witnesses, they said. Well, 3 of the 12 witnesses that we heard in our open hearings were the minority witness requests. So you'll hear those arguments, the most unfair in history. The fact is, we had the same process. In those other impeachments, the majority did not surrender its subpoena power to the minority. You know what it did? It said, you can subpoena witnesses, and if the majority doesn't agree, you can force a vote. That is the same process we had here. The majority does not surrender its subpoena power. Didn't in the prior impeachments, didn't in this one. When they say the process was unfair, what they really mean is, don't look at what the president did. For God's sake, don't look at what the president did. Now, you'll also hear, I think the second thing you'll hear from the president's team is attack the managers. Those managers are just awful. They're terrible people, especially that Schiff guy. He's the worst. He's the worst. And Exhibit A, he mocked the president. He mocked the president. He mocked the president as if he was shaking down the leader of another country, like he was an organized crime figure. He mocked the president. He said, it was like the president said, listen, Zelensky, because I'm only going to say this 7 times. Well, I discovered something very significant by mocking the president. And that is, for a man who loves to mock others, he does not like to be mocked. So it turns out he's got a pretty thin skin. Who would have thought it? Never mind that I said I wasn't using his words before I said it, and I wasn't using his words after I said it, and I said I was making a parody of his words. It's an outrage. He mocked the president. That Schiff. Terrible. Now, they will attack my other colleagues, too, for things said in the heat of debate here on the floor, as we're reaching the wee hours of the morning. And they'll attack some of my colleagues who aren't even in this chamber. Maybe they'll attack the squad. That's a perennial favorite with the president. If they attack the squad, you should ask, what does that have to do with the price of beans? But you can expect attacks on all kinds of members of the House that have nothing to do with the issues before you. And when you hear those attacks, you should ask yourself, away from what do they want to distract my attention? Because 9 times out of 10, it will be the president's misconduct. But look for it. Attacks on the managers, attacks on other House members, attacks on the Speaker, attacks on who knows what. It's all of the same ilk. Whatever you do, just don't consider the president's misconduct. You'll also hear attacks on the Constitution. Of course, it won't be framed as an attack on the Constitution, but that's really what it represents. And that is, abuse of power doesn't violate the Constitution. Presidents of the United States have every right to abuse their power. That's the argument. Okay, I know it's a hard argument to make, right? Presidents have a constitutional right to abuse their power. And how dare the House of Representatives charge a president with abusing his power? Now, I'm looking forward to that constitutional argument by Alan Dershowitz. Because I want to know why abusing power and trust is not impeachable now, but it was a few years ago. Because the last time I checked, I don't think there was a significant change to the Constitution between the time he said it was impeachable and the time he's saying now that apparently it is not impeachable. So I'm looking forward to that argument. But I'm also looking forward to Ken Starr's presentation, because during the Clinton impeachment, he maintained that a president not only could but must be impeached for obstructing justice.